Hello and welcome to another episode of Facts, Values, and Flourishing. I'm Craig Biddle. Today I want to talk about how to consciously design your life around your values and your desires. And in particular, I want to talk about how to make your values and your desires essentially one and the same thing. A quick recap. So last week we spoke about how virtues are principled actions toward life-serving values that sustain and enhance your life. And the goal here, of course, is, as we've been speaking from the beginning about, the goal is a life of flourishing, a life that is the very best life that you can live. And we've grounded this in perceptual reality as the morally correct thing to do. So I want to capitalize on some of what we've discussed by revisiting the question of values and talking about values from two different perspectives that we've not yet looked at them. Now, it's pretty popular in most, or in almost all, self-help literature to talk about the importance of setting goals and then breaking your big goals, your big complex goals down into manageable projects, and then eventually breaking those down into action items so that you can take action, get those projects done, and eventually achieve your goals. And that's all very, very good advice. What I want to do with the material that we've been discussing is I want to provide that advice with some more information, not only the information that has been inherent in this entire discussion, which is that there's moral weight behind doing this. There's moral weight behind pursuing your goals and achieving your happiness. That's the morally correct thing to do. But I want to get scientific again about how it is that you can arrange your values in your life so that you can pursue them most effectively. And now that we know that values are the objects of actions and that virtues are the actions that you take to achieve these life-serving values, it's important to be able to identify exactly what values are going to make your life really wonderful. What values for you, given your contexts, your interests, your needs, what values are going to make you flourish if you pursue them. It's not enough to just, if you just dive into a self-help book that starts telling you how to achieve your goals, you might not know which goals are going to make you happy, which goals are going to make your life super fulfilling. And so there's a way to think about values and goals that I think will be helpful in either helping you to establish the goals and values that you want to pursue in life, or if you're already doing fairly well in that regard, which I'm sure many of you are, it might help you to augment and bolster that effort in your life, regardless of where you are. So what I want to talk about is the difference between two kinds of values. A value is that which you act to gain and keep. That's the strict definition of a value. Well, by that definition, your desires, the things that you want, the God said take what you want, that middle part, take what you want, those are not necessarily your values. It depends on whether you're actually taking action to gain and keep them. Strictly speaking, a value is an object of an action. I think there's a saying that goes something to the effect of a goal without action is a mere fantasy. There are variations on that. A goal without an action plan is a mere wish or whatever. But the point of that is essentially correct. If you want something, but you're not going after it, you're not actually taking action toward the thing, you don't really value it. You're just holding it in your mind as a desire or a fantasy. Now, there's nothing wrong with having desires that you have not gone after yet. But it's important to understand the difference between your actual values and your desires, because if you don't, you can feel like, oh, I have this philosophy and I have these values, these things that I want, and you can continue to feel like you have these values, but you're not actually ever going after them. And if you understand that there's a difference between values that you actually pursue, real values, and desires or things that you would like to pursue but are not yet pursuing, it can be very clarifying. So I want to talk about how to take an assessment of your actual values in life, not your professed values, not the values that you want, but the values that you are actually engaging in, the values you're actually pursuing. And so we'll talk about these in terms of actual values versus desired values. Now, the first thing to do to assess where you are in life in regard to your values is to figure out what your actual values are. And the best way to do that is to look back over the past few months of your life and say to yourself, where have I been putting my time? What have I been acting to gain and keep? Now, sometimes for some people this might not be a pleasant exercise, because you might find that you haven't been going after the things that you really want. You've been sort of squandering your time doing things that ultimately, on reflection, are going to turn out to not be time well spent. But don't beat yourself up on this if that's what you discover. The point is to figure that out if that's what's been happening, so that we can change that, so that you can change that by identifying the second set of values, your desired values. Figure out what the difference between these two is, whether there's some intersection, no doubt there will be, and then reassess how you're going to do things moving forward. So the best way to get your head around your actual values in life is not to ask yourself, what do I want? But to ask yourself, what have I done? What have I been doing with my time? Have you been working hard at a job you love during the day and coming home and spending your time in the evenings doing things you love, learning to paint, learning to play the piano, going out and tango, dancing, or just doing things that are very deliberately things that you want to do, that are the things that by design, these are aspects of your life that you want to fill your time with and flourish thereby? Or have you been working at a job that you don't really care that much about, coming home, channel surfing, or spending a bunch of time on Facebook arguing with people to no good end, or whatever, or something in between? I mean, maybe you've been doing some things that are really excellent for your life and really are fulfilling, and that you've been squandering some of your time or wasting some time on other things. But the point is, whatever you've been doing, you want to take account of it. So look back. Take notes. How have I spent my time? What have I been doing in the evenings? What have I been doing on the weekends? What have I been doing during the working hours? What do I think of this job that I'm in? Is it something that I actually enjoy, or is this just something that I fell into and am just sort of biding my time in there? Take an actual account of what you've been doing, where your time has been going, and write it down. Just put it down. This doesn't have to be pretty. Just get it down either on paper or on electronic form, whatever works for you. And then, as a separate exercise, make another list of values. These are your desired values, not things that you're actually pursuing yet, but things that you want to pursue that you're not yet pursuing. Put those down. Maybe there's a job that you want that you have not yet gone after. Maybe you would like to start a business and you've been thinking about doing this, but you've not yet done it. That would go down there. Maybe there's a hobby you'd like to take up. Maybe you want to take up sailing or surfing or Krav Maga or painting or sculpture or whatever. Put these things down on this desired value list. Once you get your values worked out here, so your actual values, the things you've actually been going after, pursuing with your time, and the things that you would like to pursue in life, figure out what the intersections are. Hopefully there is some, no doubt there will be. And then figure out what on this list, the actual values list, you'd like to get off of that list and replace it with some of these things that you'd really like to do with your life. This is how you design your life around things that you actually want, that you actually would love to do, that will fill your life with joy. It's very easy to hold in your mind that you have these values, these things you want to do, and that those are your values, while in fact, other things are your values. Other things are the way you're actually spending your time. And if you do this exercise and make a list of actual values versus desired values, you'll probably find that there's some adjusting to be done here. And again, don't beat yourself up if it's not what you hoped it would be or what you thought it would be, because this can be a kind of a stark discovery when you see that, oh my goodness, I'm not really living by the values that I thought I was. But the good news is that once you've done this exercise, you can get on with living and in embracing the values and pursuing the values that you actually want to make your life wonderful. Now, I want to bring this into the standard self-help context again, or the standard self-help framework. Again, most good self-help books will talk about the importance of identifying your goals, breaking them down into manageable projects, and then breaking those down into action steps that you can take. And that's really, really good advice. But if you don't have the right goals, that's not going to help you to flourish either. That's just going to help you get done whatever this thing is that you happen to regard as your goal. It's the conscious thinking about what will be a flourishing life for me. That's the thing that can give value to good self-help advice, such as how to break down goals and pursue them. And if you don't have your mind around the things that really are going to fill your life with joy, then you're just wasting time going after values that are, just lesser values. And ultimately, this is a matter of sacrifice, because even if you don't know that you're pursuing lesser values than the values that would make your life great, if you're doing that, you're living a mitigated life. You're living a life that is less than it could be. So I urge you to go through this process, organize your values accordingly, and then start focusing on how you can bring the values that you actually want into your actual value list, or your actual value category, where you're pursuing these things rather than just dreaming about them. And I also want to tie this into the fundamentals that we've been talking about. So life is a process of self-generated, goal-directed action. And when we talk about breaking goals down ultimately into action steps, it's that action that is what life consists of. At any given moment, we're living in the moment. We're just living now. It's always now. It's never the future, right? And so it's the actions that life consists of. And this is why the difference between the ideas that you have about what you want and the actual actions you're taking toward values is so important, because one of them is life and the other one is dreams. So do this exercise. This roots everything that you're doing in the actual nature of life, the fact that your life is the actions that you take, the time that you spend, the energy you exert on the things that you pursue, the things you go after, the things you act to gain and keep. That's what life is. And if you can bring your desired values into that, instead of having them floating on the outskirts, then you're living a fully designed life. Now, I want to talk just a few minutes here at the very end of this. I'm going to get personal about some of the things that I have done to help myself to actually achieve my goals once I have gone through this process of identifying my desired goals and my actual values, and then figuring out how to bring those together. Because that's just one big step, but then there's the question of how do you get yourself to actually follow through. And the virtues that we spoke about last week are extremely important. Those are the fundamental things that we have to do. We have to, go by reason. We have to be productive. We have to use our own judgment. We have to have integrity. We have to be honest, and so on. But those are very, very abstract ideas. They're very abstract principles that have very broad implications in terms of action. But each of us has very specific goals in life, and we all have very specific needs and different temperaments and things like that. So you need to figure out what works for you to make sure that you actually do go after your goals and your values and achieve them. So a few of the things that I do, I'm just going to spit out about 6 of them here. I mentioned one last week, which is I have this saying, go about your business. And I like the business analogy because I treat my life like a business, and I think it's a good idea to do that. And the goal is to get the biggest return possible, both in terms of material values and in terms of spiritual values. You want an ROI of the highest amount of material and spiritual values that you can get out of life. And so for me, this idea of go about your business is really helpful. And as I mentioned, so I have a plan all the time, and I'm constantly revising that plan. But I try not to let my feelings drive me at any point in life. I enjoy my feelings. They're my means of enjoying my values. But my means of pursuing my values, and identifying my values, is not my feelings. It's my reasoned thinking. So I have a plan, and I try to always remind myself to stick with that plan. So if my plan is to get up and write in the morning, then I want to do that. Even if I don't feel like writing, I want to stick with my plan. So to go about your business, I think, can be very helpful in that regard. Now there's another technique that I use that I think is very helpful. You probably use to-do lists. Almost everybody does. So you have a list of the things that you want to do, and it's a good idea to make those action items. Well, if they are action items, and I like to make my list action items, it's good to use verbs and full, complete sentences that tell you what to do. So for instance, instead of business plan, it would say something like, write the introduction to the business plan, or draft write the first draft of the business plan, or outline the business plan. But a verb with a full sentence. And this works better than just putting down a noun like business plan or Krav Maga or something like that. If you have write the business plan or register for Krav Maga, if you use an actual verb and a complete sentence, and an action verb, I mean, I don't know, all verbs are action verbs, but a specific and a sort of an active verb that is forceful in your thinking. And if you think about it, this is what marketers do. You've heard of a CTA, a call to action in marketing. And the reason that marketers use CTAs, the reason they want on a button on the internet, instead of it just saying, ebook, it says something like, get your ebook now, right? Why? Why do marketers use that? Well, they use it because that kind of language has a powerful effect on us psychologically. And it has that same effect whether you are whether you're on the internet shopping, or whether you give yourself that same kind of language on your to-do list. So I strongly recommend that instead of Italy, it says purchase tickets to Italy, or make reservations at hotel in Italy, right? If you're looking to travel, or if it's, apply for the job, make it, send the application now, or something to that effect, not just application. And I have found this extremely helpful in my life, and I've spoken to other people who I've advised on this, and they've used it and found it very helpful as well. So on your to-do list, use strong verbs and complete sentences in the things that you put on your list. I think you'll find it very helpful. Another thing I remind myself to do is to focus on benefits. Sometimes I need to get up really early in the morning to get something done, before I start getting phone calls or before meetings kick in or whatever. And it's not fun to get up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. So how do you do it? How do you get out of bed when it's just no fun to get up that early? Or how do you push yourself through difficult goals? It's not necessarily always getting up, but the idea is, how do you get yourself to do the difficult aspects of your work? And if you focus on the benefits, the things that you're trying to achieve in this endeavor, then you usually can get yourself pretty psyched up about it. Now, it's not going to make everything cotton candy and rainbows, but if the alarm goes off, and instead of going, oh, I don't want to get up now, you have a standing order to say, why am I getting up this early? What am I going to get out of this? And you think, oh, if I get this business plan written, then what's going to happen is X, Y, and Z. And you think down the line of the things that you're going to get by taking this action. And again, this is just a sort of a psychological trick, but a very friendly one that you play on yourself. And it's not really even a trick, because you're not fooling yourself. You're projecting the real reason that you need to get up and take this action. You're looking forward, and you're giving yourself the standing order to look forward, so that you can be motivated by love of values rather than by just an alarm going off and the drudgery of, oh, I must do this, or I have to get up, or I ought to get up, or whatever. There's a value out there that you're after, and if you can keep the values in mind, it's very motivating. And it's just a standing order to focus on the benefits, focus on the values. Another thing that I think is very important and I do frequently is I reflect on my successes. And I've been talking about this for years in lectures that I've given and the importance of it, but I've got a new idea that I came across a few months ago that I find extremely helpful in this regard. So I'll first just give you the general idea and then I'll bring in this other value. So the idea is that if you pay attention to what you've succeeded at in life, it does a number of things for you. First of all, it gives you a lot of spiritual fuel. If you realize, oh my goodness, I've really achieved a bunch of things in the past few weeks. It fuels you to do more of the same kind of thing moving forward. So it fuels you to be more successful. It helps to support your self-esteem. It helps to augment your self-esteem because that's where self-esteem comes from. It comes from realizing that you are capable of dealing with the world and worthy of success by dealing with the world and achieving success. So reflecting on your successes is really important. But there's something even more important about this that I hadn't discovered until fairly recently. There's a gentleman named Dan Sullivan who runs a company called Strategic Coach. He's got a short video titled How to Measure Success. I strongly recommend that you go find it. It's about a 5-minute video. You can find it on YouTube. And what Sullivan talks about in this video is what he calls the difference between the gap and the gain. And so here's the idea. We all have an ideal in mind as we're going through life, or if you're, I strongly recommend that you have ideals in life. You want long-term goals, you want things you're after, and there's sort of the ideal, the thing you're going after, the thing you want to achieve, the way you want to be, whatever the case may be. There's some goal or some ideal that you will hold up here as the thing you're after. And in life, we're constantly striving for those goals, either the big goal or the ideal. And at any given time, if you're looking from where you are at that ideal, it can feel like you have not made much ground. This is what Sullivan calls the gap. It's the gap between where you are and the ideal or the big goal that you're after. And if you constantly focus only on that gap, you can feel really like you're not getting anything done because it just always seems so far away. And so what he recommends is that you measure your success by looking back at your accomplishments, at what you've achieved, at the things that you've done. And this is the simplest idea in the world in a sense, but it's also profoundly helpful because if you don't look back, if you don't take account of the achievements in your life, you're always going to feel like you're never getting anywhere because the ideal, the big goals are always going to be way far off. Sometimes you achieve the big goals and then they're not that far off, but very frequently your big goals and certainly the ideals that you set for yourself that might not even be reachable ideals, those are always going to feel like they're very far away. And if you measure your success by the distance between where you are and those big goals or ideals, you're just going to find yourself frustrated all the time. So look back, reflect on your accomplishments, and measure your success by the gain, this part, what Sullivan calls the gain, and not the gap. I found that extremely helpful and I've been using it for several months now. So the last thing, actually 2 more things I want to talk about just very briefly. How to deal with failure. I fail all the time. I fail on a regular basis. Every writer does. So I'm a writer, and one of the things writers do all the time is fail. Every time we write a paragraph or a sentence that we later have to edit, we failed to write it correctly the first time. That's what it means. We failed. Well, so what? Failure is a part of succeeding. The way that you succeed in life is by taking action. You take thoughtful action, but even thoughtful action is going to fail sometimes. And so it's going to fail insofar as what you were trying to get done with it didn't necessarily happen. But that doesn't mean that that what happened is of no value. There's actually real value in failure. Because failing, if you're being thoughtful about your goals, if you're going after things thoughtfully, failing along the way is just a learning process. It's how you learn. Thomas Edison famously said, I don't fail, or I didn't fail, I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. Well, so he's there saying that it wasn't even failure, and that's one way of looking at it. Michael Jordan is famous for saying, I've failed again and again and again in life, and that's why I succeed. And his point there is the way you succeed in life is by taking action and by failing along the way and by learning as you go, and that's how you succeed. So I think it's really helpful to look at failure as a natural and integral part of success and just embrace it. My associate editor and I talk about this all the time. Sometimes you get an article and we start editing it and we realize that we can't run this article, whether it's mine or someone else's. This article is just not going to come together. It's just not good enough. So we put it aside, and let's say we put 3 or 4 hours into this. Well, did we fail? Yeah, in a sense, we failed because we failed to bring this article to press. We failed to make it a value that's ready for the marketplace. But we learned in the process. So it doesn't matter that that didn't make it to market. Now, if you fail all the time and never have any successes, then that's a problem. But the point is that failing is a part of succeeding, and learning as you go is absolutely necessary. And I find this just extremely helpful to think in terms of failure being an integral and necessary part of success, so that you actually embrace this thing as a learning process rather than as a big frustration. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to re-mention what I call the 100% rule. And this is Wayne Gretzky's beautiful statement that 100% of the shots you don't take won't go in. This is such a metaphysically powerful idea, because it's right there at the level of like the law of identity. If you don't go after the things you want in life, you will not get the things you want in life. And this ties right into our theme for the past several episodes. God said, take what you want and pay for it. If you want to make your life wonderful, if you want to fill your days and years with values that will make your life just a big, flourishing, wonderful life, you have to take action. You have to think and act. And I see so many people. I have friends who I've seen gone astray this way. I've seen a lot of other people who aren't necessarily friends, but who talk a big game about what they're going to do or what they want, and they never get to taking the action. And the thing I want to point out here is that it's a moral matter to take the action. It's a moral matter because you live once. This is it. Every moment that passes is gone forever. You cannot get it back. So be scientific about your life. Be scientific about flourishing. Get your values in order. Come up with standing orders that will help you to achieve your values. I've just given you some that I use. Doesn't mean that they're going to be the best for you. But figure out what kinds of standing orders or personal policies will ensure that you actually do wake up every day and go after the values that are going to fill your life with joy. Because this is it. We have one shot at this, and it's just such a beautiful thing to do to make your life wonderful. Why turn this opportunity into dust? Make it so. So we're going to have one more episode of Facts, Values, and Flourishing next week, in which I want to just try to pull together the entire, sort of summarize the 7 or 8 weeks that we've had of this so far, and try to give you a good summary of the way of how to hold all of these ideas as a moral matter. Like, this is what morality actually is. Whatever other people say morality is, duties to deities and duties to communities and duties to parents and all that, there's no evidence in support of any of that. There's evidence in support of what we've been talking about in this series, and there's a science to making your life the very best it can be. And so what I want to do next week is I want to come up with some ideas about how you can integrate this stuff and really hold this philosophy as your own, really own it. So that instead of just having heard it and sort of walk away with, oh, okay, well, that made sense, you actually own this thing and live by it. and you have sort of moral fervor behind making your life the best that it can be. So I hope you'll join me again for the final episode of Facts, Values, and Flourishing next week. Till then, love your life.